All right. Thank you for meeting with me today, Dahlia.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Now, our interview today is going to cover a lot of different aspects. We have your opinions on books and then also your journey on, like, as a book blogger and social media personnel like that, and also your process of interviewing. And I'm really excited to get started on that. So, before we start,
Excited too.
yes. Before we start, could you provide a brief introduction about yourself, please?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Dahlia. I'm the bookstagrammer and interviewer behind Of Pages in Print on social media. I'm a voracious reader and audiobook devourer. I always mess up on that word. And I created Of Pages in Print to support YA, fantasy, and romance authors, but most recently I've really started to branch into even general fiction and nonfiction, which is very fun.
I agree. I totally love like romance and fantasy, and I feel like exploring into new areas is always so cool because it's just so different from what I've read before, but it's also really interesting to see like the different writing styles too. So,
Absolutely. There's so much exploration, I think, in one genre, right? You can read one
mhm,
fantasy book that's, say, more of like a cozy fantasy, and the writing style, I find it's usually more like kind of like flowery, very lush and like immersive. And then if you read more of like I actually haven't read like this kind of story in a while, but like a Game of Thrones style fantasy, it's going to be
mhm.
sharper, more action packed. So there's so much to explore.
Yes, for sure. And that leads me to our first question. So, as you said, you mainly feature fantasy, young adult, and romance. Is there one genre that you enjoy just a little bit more than others? And if so, why?
I love I love all of them, I'd say equally, because they each give me a very different reading experience. As I said, like
Hmm.
with fantasy and romance and YA, you have so much that you can read, so much that you can explore. I gravitate more towards fantasy just because I love that idea of exploring a world that I've never been in, right? With
Hmm.
contemporary romance or like just the romance genre in general, typically that's set in our world or it's set in like an aspect of our world that we've explored. And then in YA, there's a lot of contemporary YA and also fantasy. But I love being able to just completely dive into something new, whether that's with magic or mythology or just a second world fantasy.
Hmm.
I also read a lot of crossover and like genre blending books. So I read a lot of YA romance, YA fantasy, fantasy romance, romantasy, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of like crossover and blending that I have there. But truly, at this point, it's kind of whatever I'm in the mood in. So I find that like romance is more relaxing for me than fantasy, which is so funny because it used to be the opposite. I used to find fantasy very relaxing, and like contemporary romance would make me so anxious. And I find that so funny. Um, but now it's the opposite, and not that fantasy makes me like anxious, but it's just a completely different, more like exhilarating experience. And then contemporary
Hmm.
romance, I'm able to like more relax. So it's whatever I'm in the mood for.
Yeah, I think those three categories are really like intertwined. Like a lot of books feature all three, and I just love reading those books because you really get like an aspect of every single like genre out there. And I do agree with what you said about like the shift with being like, oh, I used to love fantasy, but now it's
hmm
like the opposite. Can you explain a little bit more on that shift and like what led you to it?
Yeah, so I definitely fantasy is still the genre that I read the most and the one that I enjoy the most.
Hmm.
But basically, when I initially started, I really wanted to just escape into worlds I didn't know, and that's what I was able to find through fantasy and like YA fantasy. And then recently, I've been reading just to like kind of branch out, just to see what's out there, more contemporary romance, and I find that it just gives me a very different reading experience. And it's very fun to explore like a new writing style, a new world type of world building that you get in contemporary versus fantasy. I've talked with a lot of authors about like their process for world building, how it differs from like contemporary to fantasy, right? So for like
Hmm.
contemporary authors, maybe they include places that you can actually visit in the real world, and that's so much fun. And I love reading books set in LA. There's a fantastic story. This is actually a contemporary fantasy, and it's called Coffee Shop in an Alternate Universe by C.B. Lee. And the
Oh.
characters go around LA, and I just love being able to be like, oh, I know where they're going. I know where this is, but you also
Hmm.
just like have a fantasy spin on it. So it really, let's see. Yeah, it's very much just another way to explore a different type of story. I still read fantasy the most though.
Mm. I definitely have to look into that book. That does sound interesting. Like just to be able to
It's
like
adorable. I
because
love it.
yeah, because you can see yourself in the story almost. I would love to read it.
It's so good. Another really great one set in like SoCal. I'm not sure if I can't remember if it's exactly LA. The Quince
Mhm.
Project by Jessica Bada. And the characters go to like Salt and Straw. They go to the beach. And it's just
Oh my
like, it's a
God.
very immersive experience actually to read contemporary romance, I find, because you
Hmm.
can be like, oh, I know where that is, even if maybe I've never been there.
Hmm. For sure. It's like a connection that you already form with the book.
Yeah.
Nice. And what are a few of your all-time favorite books from like each of those genres, like fantasy, young adult, and romance?
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is so hard for me. I mean, there are so many. Like this list could go on and on. Like I could
Mhm.
never stop talking. But
Mhm.
I and I have a lot of favorites in these different genres for different reasons, especially like if they're part of a subgenre. Outlander is one of my favorite like fantasy series I've read. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, that one is so beautiful. It's set like in a circus setting, and the writing
Mm.
style is gorgeous. And she uses a lot of different, like, I believe she uses like newspaper clippings and even like second person narrations. So that's a very unique experience for reading.
Mhm.
Gallant by V.E. Schwab is it's
Ooh.
so beautiful. It's a Secret Garden retelling. I love that one. And then the Incandescent by Emily Tesh. This is I think it just released, and it's
Oh.
like a dark academia with fantasy and action and a sapphic romance, and it's beautiful. So those are some fantasy books that I've loved recently. And then for YA, this one I cannot recommend enough. It's Lovely War by Julie Berry. This combines Greek mythology with, I believe, both World War One and World War Two. I can't remember if it's just one of them, but that one's
Mhm.
beautiful. The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White is like a YA horror set in, I think, 1880s Victorian England or England. I can't remember quite the time frame for that one. Another recent favorite is Time After Time by Mickey Dodry, I think is her last name. I may be mispronouncing that, but it is a almost time travel, but not quite. Like you have to, I don't want to spoil it, but you have to read it to understand.
Okay.
But it's so beautifully written. It's two love stories set 100 years apart, but they're interconnected and it's gorgeous. And
Mhm.
then let's see, we have Anatomy, a Love Story Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. Anatomy is also set, I think, in like 1880s England. I love books. I love historical fiction mixed with some
Mhm.
fantasy. And then Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood is a Jane Eyre retelling, and that one is beautiful. Another favorite is Ravel by Lysimia Smith. This is kind of a Moulin Rouge-esque story, and she
Ooh.
nailed it. It's beautiful. Um, and then another one that I really loved lately for YA is If We Survive This by Raquel Marie. It's a YA horror. I believe it's her first YA horror, and absolutely incredible. And then for
Nice.
romance in general, I
Mhm.
love Flirting Lessons by Jasmine Guillory. This is her first sapphic romance, and it was beautiful, so good.
Mhm.
Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. It's a
Oh
classic for a
yes.
reason. It's so much fun. I love it.
Mhm.
And They Were Roommates by Paige Powers. This one also just released. It's a light academia, which I don't see a lot. So that was very fun. It's like a very bright and funny, but it also tackles a lot of difficult topics, which I love. And then Coffee Shop and Alternate Universe, which I already
Hmm.
mentioned. And then for like a summary romance, The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther is
Oh,
amazing.
yeah. Thank you so much for that. I need to
Of
like
course, I just
research
like
all
completely
about them.
listed like my favorites.
No, yeah.
They're
And by
so
your
good. They're
description,
amazing.
by your descriptions, like a lot of them align with my own interests. Like when you mentioned V. Schwab, I love her writing style, the way
Hmm.
that she combines like different time periods into like one single book. And also the Greek mythology one, I definitely have to check that one out because I've read Circe and the Song of Achilles, and they were like amazing. And they got me into Greek
Oh, they're
mythology.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they're right there on my shelf. I have them.
oh, beautiful. And I have to like read much more about it. But they all sound so good. So thank you so much for that
They're
again.
so great. Absolutely. Greek mythology is like it's my favorite. I love any mythology focused story. Lately
Hmm.
I've been trying to find kind of stories with maybe Jamaican mythology or Irish mythology or Chinese, South Asian mythology, because I think that Greek mythology is like a main focus in terms of mythology,
Hmm.
and I love it to pieces. Like you can give me every single Greek mythology story and I'll eat it up, but I also love to see kind of like the overlap that you have in other mythologies and cultures, and then also kind of like, of course, the very unique stories that you have depending on the mythology.
Hmm. On that note, have you heard of The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang?
Yes, I actually have it somewhere over there. I can't remember where.
Did you read it? Or,
I have not read it yet. No, I love her work so much. I've read Yellowface, and that was more of
mhm.
like a, I believe, a speculative fiction is what you call it. And
Yeah,
that was
like,
absolutely incredible.
yeah. I thought The Poppy War was like a mix. It had like a blend of Chinese mythology. I don't know if I'm
Oh, I
right,
love that.
but I'm excited to read it as well, even though a lot I've heard a lot of good things about it, but also the book is very harsh from what I've speculated. So I'm a
Yeah, I'm
little
not
scared
sure,
going
but
in.
her stories are very powerful, and
Hmm.
they are just so strong. Her stories are very strong. They're very powerful. Maybe Poppy War is like a little bit of like a harsher, more fierce story than say Yellowface, but I think that it will be absolutely incredible. And I know from what I've seen, it's like a very just immersive, addictive fantasy. So that's right up my alley.
For sure. And recently, I've been loving Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I've just actually finished reading it, and I'm about to start the second book. So I was wondering, do you have any thoughts on that book? Or,
Absolutely. So Stephanie Garber, I love her work so much. I started with the Caraval series, which is like that interconnected first series before Once Upon a Broken Heart, and that is
mhm,
beautiful. But I love this series as well. She writes the most addictive, like dark fairy tale-esque stories that are just so beautiful. But this story also has a very like very large space in my heart because I joined a group on Instagram. I think this was in like 2023, perhaps. I can't actually
mhm,
remember when The Ballad of Never After released. Maybe this was 2022. But I joined a group on Instagram to discuss the book. It was like a little book club scenario. And we shared like our annotations and things like that. So that was so much
mhm,
fun. And this was before I had started my Bookstagram. And I remembered thinking, oh, I feel like this would be so much fun if I could kind of do this on my own platform, on my own book focused platform. And I believe I mentioned the idea of like, oh, I might start a Bookstagram. Like, what do you guys think? And they were all just like, yes, do it. So I was like, oh, okay. So then I started my Bookstagram, and then I like shared it with them the day of, and was just kind of like, hey guys, I started it. And they all followed me, and I still have them like supporting me today. So that is just
mhm.
um it's just the sweetest community. And yeah, so I definitely would credit Once Upon a Broken Heart to kind of like that
Wow,
kickstarting my idea for the Bookstagram.
that's amazing. So this book was like the cause of it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice. And I mean, I just love it. And I mean, I've seen TikToks about like whether to read the series first or the Caraval series, and I just like wasn't sure. So, but I'm probably going to read the Caraval series afterwards, and I'm excited to read that as well because I know Jax is also in it with
He
Donatella.
is.
So I'm excited to see where that goes and how it plays a role in this book. So,
It's so much fun. I read the Caraval series first, and then I did Once Upon a Broken Heart. And
mhm.
I think that if you do that reading experience, what it does is just kind of gives you background for Jax himself, and then also
Um,
for like some of the characters that you meet in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So I always am just like, if you haven't read Once Upon a Broken Heart, maybe start with Caraval. But I mean, I'm really interested in seeing how your reading experience of Caraval is impacted by reading Once Upon a Broken Heart first. So you'll have to let me know.
okay, will do. And with that being said, let's shift towards our book recommendation, more about the book recommendations. So, when you create these lists on Instagram, do you plan them around a theme or do you just go with whatever vibe you're feeling that day?
So generally it is around a theme, or if I'm like yeah, so generally it's around a theme. So I love to do trope recommendation reels because those are really fun and just a great
Hmm.
way to kind of hook. It's like a good hook, right? Like enemies to lovers book recs. You know,
Yeah.
people, and I am people. I am always looking for them. Everyone's always looking for some new enemies to lovers recs. So
Hmm.
tropes are really
Sure.
great. I also love doing like seasonal recommendations. So you know, like some summer book recs, fall book recs, things like that. Even more even and these are a little bit more like hyper specific, and I do find that like the engagement for these aren't as great, but like books to read if you love baking, books to read if you love gardening, like things like that. So when they do
Hmm.
find their people though, they get like great reception. So I love doing those types of themes. And then I batch my content, so I am like filming probably about like 10 reels on, like, say over the weekend, or say on like a weekday, whichever whenever I decide to do it. And then I kind of roll those out over the course of like a few weeks, see how they perform, and then that informs what type of content I create next. But in
Hmm.
terms of like what I post on a specific day, I take a look at all of those batch reels that I've made and ask myself, like, what vibe are we feeling today? So it's a bit of both.
Hmm. I like that. And how do you manage your time with, like reading and then filming and then doing everything else, like interviewing authors and more?
Yeah, audiobooks. Audiobooks are a great resource. I cannot recommend them enough. Audiobooks are primarily how I consume stories, just because
Oh.
there's not a lot of time in the day. I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of people, including myself, I mean, it's hard to make time or find time to sit down with a book and actually read it. So
Mhm.
audiobooks are where I turn to in order to get through a very long TBR, in order to get through upcoming releases and also backlist titles. Um, and there are a lot of really great audiobook resources. So Libby is the free library app, and you can just like get a library card, hook it up to your Libby app, and then they have a ton of audiobooks.
Mhm.
Libro FM for like audiobook subscriptions, and there are just so many fantastic resources. So audiobooks, that's how I get through my reading list. And then I'd already mentioned this, but batching content, so filming most of it on one day, that just helps make
Mhm.
it more manageable. You're not like scrambling to create something on like one day when you really need it, right? You have something
Yeah.
back in your list that you can like pull from. Um, and then yeah, so I'd say that audiobooks are great. And then also kind of just thinking about what you want to post a little bit before you do that. So I kind of like to think a week before I actually post stuff, when do I want to post said reel, said graphic, said whatever I'm posting, just that way it's not like stressful and you're thinking about like, oh, I don't have anything to post today. What do I do?
Mhm. Thank you for that. I really need to. I've heard a lot of good things about audiobooks, and recently I've had like not a lot of time on my hands, so I really wanted to like get into that. Now let's shift towards the interviewing stage. So, as someone who regularly interviews authors on Instagram and other platforms, what's your process for reaching out and setting those interviews up like?
Yeah, so I generally start by just reading a book. So I just read the book and I'm like, oh, I really loved this. As I'm reading it, I usually am like, they're like, here's some questions in the back of my head that I kind of want to ask the author. I think that he would like spark a good conversation. And then I
Mhm,
just usually message on Instagram and just say, I loved your book. I'd love to talk about it. This was kind of what I was thinking for like questions, the time frame, the amount of time that it would take. And I mean, we just continue with like an Instagram DM chat. It's very casual, it's very friendly.
mhm,
Sometimes I go through the publicists or their email if they have an email, if they prefer email on their website, I email them. But publicists, if they send me like an arc to read for the book,
mhm.
sometimes they actually send me the arc for the interview, or other times it's just like they send me the arc and then I read it and I'm like, oh, I think this would make a great interview. Could we set that up?
So for the arc, is it a like a book that's not published yet?
Yes, so an ARC is an advanced reader copy, and this is generally going to be, I don't think I actually have one near me, but this is generally going to be a paperback. It will likely have some like typo errors or maybe even a few missing sentences. But it is just an early copy that is physical that's sent out to reviewers, book platforms, whatever, like people who are planning to create content for it early to promote it, to review it.
Okay. And do you reach out by saying you want the arc, or do you just reach out asking if you can do like a book review on their like newest edition?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Generally, so sometimes they'll email me just like with kind of like an ARC list. If you're part of like an influencer program, that's typically how it's done. But a lot
Oh.
of times I do reach out directly to the publisher, like their general publisher email or their publicists, and
Hmm.
with like, whatever the book title is, slash, or like followed by ARC request, and just
Hmm.
say a little bit about myself, a little bit about my platform, why the book appeals to me, why I'd love to feature it. And then sometimes, if I do think that it would be a book that would fit really well for my platform in terms of like an interview or like something that I would really love to discuss, I'll include that in there as well.
Amazing. And going back to the interviews, what kind of questions tend to get the biggest emotional reactions or spark the most thoughtful answers?
The ones that are the most specific to the book. I love throwing in a mix of more general questions and then very like specific, targeted, and tailored directly to the book. The general ones are usually more so just like, are your first drafts too long, too short, or just right? What is your first step in editing? Those are really great way
Hmm.
to get to know the author's process and their like create what they love to do in like the creative outlets. But the ones that really trigger the best responses, in my opinion, are the ones that are very specific to the book. So, for example, I just did a launch event with Daria Lavelle for Aftertaste. It is a brilliant speculative fiction debut. It's set in the New York City culinary scene with ghosts and
Mm.
love and grief and romance, and it's amazing. Highly recommend it. But we were talking, and of course, it has food. So, that's set with the culinary scene. And I
Mm.
asked her, um, if she would expand a bit about her process for writing the experience that people who have immigrated have, where they're able to reconnect to their culture through food. And
Oh,
that
wow.
triggered just the most beautiful response from her. She talked about her childhood, where she maybe didn't remember the culture that, or the place that she came from, where she immigrated from, but she could remember the food and she could remember her culture through her food. So, just the ones that are very specific to them and their book and the way that maybe their process for like creating that story.
Mm. I love that. Like the most authentic questions always get the most authentic answers.
You
That's
got it,
really
yeah.
good. And has any interview taught you something surprising or deeper than you expected? And if so, what did you learn?
I learn at least one thing from every single interview, and I think that it's always so beautiful to just kind of sit there and talk to whoever it is I'm talking to. I'm talking to someone, and I like realize something. Um, and generally, what I find is that like as a whole, these interviews have shown me that you're not alone. There are so many experiences that feel very isolated to yourself, that feel you feel lonely in what you're experiencing. You don't know who you can turn to. But hearing authors and people in this industry talking about very similar experiences they've had and being able to turn to their community, it really has kind of helped show me that there are people that you can turn to and that you're not alone, even if you do feel like you are sometimes. So there are
Mhm,
people out there who want to help you, who want to help you succeed, who would are happy to just talk to you about whatever is going on. And I think that that is just the most powerful thing.
mhm. So these book interviews turn out to be much more than just about books, right? Like because you've
Absolutely.
said, nice. Okay, that's amazing. So what would you say is your biggest tip for someone interviewing authors for the first time?
Listen to the authors. Don't worry about moving to your next question. Don't worry about like, for example, if you have your questions on like a sheet of paper or like in a window screen on your computer, whatever you're filming with. Don't worry about like making sure that you know what you're going to ask next, about making sure that you're getting to that next question like immediately after they talk. Just listen. It's conversation. You're having fun. And then after they're done talking, even if it takes you 10 seconds to find where you are, to find your next question, that is so much better than just kind of like making sure that you have that question like ready to go. Because when you're engaged, they're engaged. And then,
Mm,
um, oh, and then this one, I remember I struggled with this a little bit, or a lot, when I first started, which was I always felt like I had to say something after the author finished, after whoever I was interviewing, after they finished answering my question. I
mhm,
felt like I had to add one more line of commentary right before I started my next question. You don't have
mhm.
to. If you want to, if you feel like you have something that you want to add, if you feel like it will make the conversation better, go ahead and add it. But also don't feel pressure to like say something again, right? You know, if you feel like just moving on to your next question is what works best, move on to your next question.
Wow. Okay, thank you so much for that last one. I really appreciate it because I wasn't sure if it was like which way was right or if that was even
Mhm.
necessary, but you clarified it really well. So thank you so much.
Oh, of course. I mean, I think, and also it depends on who you ask. Some people will be like, no, I love to, I like to add something else to the conversation just to keep it like very, conversational. But I think it's really just finding a happy medium, right? Like finding what's most comfortable for you.
Hmm. Nice. And I know we touched on this a bit earlier about how you stay organized. And I was just wondering
Mhm.
if there's a specific tool or website or habit that you use, like a tangible thing that you like that helps you stay organized through it all, like a calendar. Would you suggest that or something else?
Yeah, the tangible thing is definitely my phone. And then through my phone, I have my calendar app, my reminders app, and my notes app. So those are the three that I primarily use to figure out my content, figure out my interviews. As I'm reading like the books that I'm planning to interview for, I write down the questions that I'm planning on asking as I read. So I write them down in my
Oh.
notes app, and then I, create a doc with, a Word doc with the questions later. Um, I use my notes app to write down content ideas. I have a whole folder that's literally just content ideas, and it just goes a very long distance. But
Hmm.
that's a great way. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily organized, but it's a great way to just have them there for me to like scroll through and be like, okay, what could I try? Um, my reminders app is I would be nowhere without it. I would be nowhere without my reminders app because a lot of times I would just completely forget something. So I like to write down like what do I need to do? Who do I need to like reach out to? What questions do I need to prepare for said interviews? And
Hmm.
then also just like writing down in my reminders app, which then transfers to my calendars app, what content I want to post on specific days.
That must be really helpful. I've started using a digital calendar myself. And I think it's a great way to help me stay organized, but also like just give me reminders too, because I feel like I would just like forget everything without it. It's super helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, there's only so much we can hold up here. Sometimes we need a little reminder.
For sure. And lastly, what advice would you give to someone who's starting a book review or author interview channel today?
Don't be afraid to ask. So if you want to ask for an interview, don't be afraid to ask. If you want to ask for an ARC or like a physical copy to review, don't be afraid to ask. I know that when I started and like when I had 100 followers, say, I remember thinking, I'm not going to ask for any ARCs until I reach 1,000 because they're just going to say no to me. They won't send me anything. I'm too small. I'm too whatever I want to call it. Um,
Hmm.
that did not I did not keep that mindset because I started like there are some really great resources for bookstagrammers and like just influencers in general who want to receive physical copies for review or whatever they want to use that physical copy for. I think they're just called book tours. Color Pages book tours is really great, and basically they send out not necessarily monthly but kind of more so I feel like weekly emails with just opportunities for book tours. So basically, they I believe this is how it works. I haven't done one in a bit, but they select you. You like submit an application for why you want to be a part of the tour. They select you. They send you a copy of the book. Sometimes it's ebook, sometimes it's audiobook, sometimes it's physical, and then
Hmm.
you're part of their like book tour, so or their blog tour. So you have a specific day that you need to post something on, say, your Instagram or your TikTok or your
Oh.
blog about that book. So that's a really great way to start getting number one, like relationships with publishers and other publishing professionals, as well as receiving copies. So I started doing that, I think probably when I started becoming like a part of the tours, I think even when I had just like reached 200 followers. So they're really
Hmm.
looking for account sizes of all different types. I mean, they have some who have 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 followers, and then they also have some who have 200. So those are really
Hmm.
great resources. Um, but again, it's just don't be afraid to ask. I mean, the worst that can happen is they either say no or they don't answer your request. And I mean,
True.
that's not great. It's not a great feeling, but that's the worst that can happen. And you'll be surprised by the amount of yeses you will receive.
Mhm. So, would you say that you would have to have a book account, or can you maybe just use your personal one?
I think that you could probably use your personal one. I never tried that with mine just because I like to keep my personal information private. But
Hmm.
I think that I mean, depending if you made your personal more of like a book focused account, yes. I
Okay.
think that like I think that the account would probably have to be book focused in some respect, not necessarily like overall. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely play with it, workshop it a little bit.
Hmm. Got it. Because I was thinking what to do for myself, and it seems like I might have to create a book account, but I'm excited. I can't wait to see where it leads me.
It's so much fun. I mean, it's seriously just a blast. And another thing that I think that, I mean, the tours, if you didn't want to necessarily create like an Instagram or a TikTok, I mean, these tours work on blogs too. So if you like created a website that's just book focused, you can also do that. Um, so if you didn't want to maybe like brave the Instagram or the TikTok space,
Hmm.
just quite yet. But yeah, I mean, I think that there are so many different ways and outlets that you can share books and work with publishers and authors and publishing as a whole. So there are lots of different things you can do. And I'm very excited to see what you decide to do.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much from this interview, both in like respect to book recommendations to like the whole process of interviewing. I mean, interviewing is something that I've really loved recently. I started a while ago, but recently I picked it back up, and your insights and tips have really just gave me a new perspective on how I can tackle it in the future. So thank you so much for that. And that's it for all of my
Oh, thank you. That means a
questions.
lot to me. And you're very great at this.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to read Caraval and share with you what I think. And hopefully,
Absolutely.
And hopefully, once we both read The Poppy War, I can interview you about that as well, if you're up for
I'd
that.
love to chat about it.
Sounds so good. I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much for joining me again.
You as well. Thank you.